Good evening. I would like to call this regular meeting of the the Loveland Board of Education for the purpose of a work session to order. I would let our audience know that we are in person in the Loveland Middle School Intermediate School cafeteria. We have two board members who are attending the meeting virtually. Ms. Pettit and Mr. Doherty are attending virtually, and now I see Ms. Pettit. Okay, I lost you there for a minute, Ms. Pettit. So we have some present in the room, we have administrators present in the room. We also have members of the Planning Commission here for their presentation later in the meeting. That is the situation. The meeting is being recorded, and it is, doesn't do any good to tell you that it's available on the website, but that's where the link is to get into the webinar. I would ask to start the meeting that there be a motion. Excuse me. Can we have a roll call? I don't see that on here. Can we have a roll call, Mr. Hawley?
Mr. Doherty?
Here.
Dr. Lorenz?
Here.
Ms. Pettit?
Here.
Dr. Swetchina?
Here.
Mrs. Washburn?
Here. All board members are present, as I noted. The first item that we need is a motion to adopt the agenda for this work session. It is the agenda that was posted on board docs. Is there a motion? I hear Mrs. Washburn.
I will second.
And I hear Dr. Swetchina to move in second to adopt the agenda. Any questions or discussion about the agenda? Seeing none, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Swetchina?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Motion carried, I think. I can't hear everybody, but hopefully everybody said yes. The first set of items on the agenda are a couple of discussion topics. And so the first topic is Loveland City School District enrollment discussion. Who is handling that for us? Mr. Dool?
Yes, I was asked to maybe say a few words with regards to student enrollment here in Loveland. I know that there has been some concern raised in the community as to perhaps the district, especially during COVID, losing large numbers of students to other types of placements. I would like to say that we have not seen that trend here in Loveland, that our enrollment has maintained fairly well. That being said, we have had some students who have chosen different options during the course of this last school year, not out of line with students who are making those choices or families that are making those choices in other school districts as well. Additionally, we, over time, have fared fairly well, even with different options that have become available to students for school choice. Looking at the advance of the charter school movement, the development of scholarship opportunities for students with disabilities to perhaps look at services outside of the district, such as the Autism and John Peterson Special Needs Scholarships, open enrollment opportunities with other school districts, and homeschooling options. The district, for the most part, has maintained our student population even with the development of additional school options available to them. If anything, I think this school year, we have had a number of families who've chosen to homeschool during the course of COVID, with the understanding that they would be re-enrolling, once the vaccine has been distributed, once we've been able to move through risk associated with the pandemic. So I think, to date, we've seen that our families have maintained their enrollment for the most part, that their students are continuing to engage either in person or remotely, and that that general concern that we might be losing our students because of the lack of ability to serve them really hasn't panned out. That we've continued to be able to have them and make progress with them here.
I would just say anecdotally, I know that on my street, there is one family who actually was a private school family,
Mhm.
and they also chose to homeschool their children this year rather than send them to the private school. So it's not just the public schools that are seeing some of that. That's just one instance, but that is anecdotally as well. I don't know if you have the answer to this or not. Do you know what our kindergarten enrollment looked like this year? Because not only did we have the pandemic, but we did not have the ability to offer the full day kindergarten that we had had. And I just wondered if you knew what our enrollment looked like compared to last year.
I don't have the numbers with me specifically, but we have maintained, for the most part, those students enrolled. We have a larger number of, I believe, remote learners at the early childhood level than perhaps at the elementary level. But they are still enrolled and still engaging. I think it's a little easier for some of those families, having already had ideas about having childcare during those other half days, to be able to have them remotely or not attend full time, but take the half day options as well, knowing how important it is for that social emotional development at that age level. I would also say, anecdotally speaking with families, that because Loveland has been able to stay face to face throughout the school year, that we've had a lot of buy-in from our families, not switching between face-to-face and remote, that the mitigation efforts that we've had in place have gone a long way in terms of our being able to stay engaged and students continue to access and participate, and make progress as we would want them to.
Okay, thank you. I had one other. Anybody else have any questions? Dr.
Yeah, Eric, to follow up on Kathy's question about kindergarten, if I remember correctly, this is the time of year that parents start to look at kindergarten options for next year. Do we have a plan yet for what that looks like?
There is kindergarten roundup information that's been shared and being shared with families. I do know that that information also includes a date by which they need to make sure they're enrolled with the district. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Connor, but is that March 12th? It's to be enrolled in order to be considered for the full day lottery system.
Yes, it is. And also, we're trending exactly as we would in a normal year. We threw out the option of, just kind of like essentially like if you had it, if we were to offer virtual, would you, take advantage of that? And out of all of the registrants we've had so far, we've only had 3 families indicate that, which goes along with kind of what our thought was. No matter where we land on virtual options, for the district next year, there's a lot of work still in place, but that for our kindergarten students, primarily most families would prefer to have their youngest learners face to face, which makes sense and is exactly kind of trending to what we're seeing.
Thank you. Any other questions for either Ms. Connor or Mr. Dool? All right, we'll be interested to see how we end up the year, how it all plays out at the end of the year, and what we're seeing for trends for next year. Thank you. The other discussion item that is on here is I've labeled it the board follow-through list and called it communication, diversity, and inclusion. I asked that this item be put on the agenda. I beg the board's indulgence just for a minute while I talk a little bit about communication. And the reason I've connected it with diversity and inclusion is the communication that we've had as a board in recent weeks has been trending toward that topic. I will just ask, first of all, if my fellow board members are still satisfied with my efforts to respond to communication that comes into the board. I will warn you that if you say you're not satisfied, then you need to raise your hand and volunteer to take over the job. But I just want to let you know that I'm still following the kind of practice that I have had for a while, which is there are some emails that come in, some messages that have come in, and I simply respond that the board has received your input and we'll consider it when it's appropriate. I have been trying to reply to some emails that are questions that I believe are questions that can be answered. In other words, policies that exist or resolutions that the board has made. I have found recently that there are quite a few questions that I can't necessarily answer as an individual board member, either that they are very broad, asking for a lot more information than could be contained in an email, or that they are hypothetical or very particular situations pertaining to an individual student or an individual building. So I just want to ask the board, I feel like Sisyphus sometimes. I'm pushing this boulder up the hill, and sometimes it rolls back on me. And I just want to make sure that I'm still acting in the capacity that the board would like to have me be acting as far as communication is concerned. Kevin is volunteering. Is that what Eric said? Mr. Doherty.
It may be what Eric said, but it's not what I'm doing. Kathy, I just want to say, really for maybe purposes of talking to the community right now, that I believe what you're trying to do is to create some kind of a pathway for a comprehensive dialogue on this subject. These issues get raised, questions get asked, and they're not the kind of thing, I think, typically that can be answered with an email. I think this needs to find some kind of an opportunity for a good, comprehensive, two-way conversation at some point. And that's my belief, what you're trying to do, and I fully support that. I think the community needs it, and I think it'll be a healthy thing for us to all get through.
Thanks. Other comments?
Kathy, I have a question. I have a comment. I need to say thank you for doing that. I think you do an excellent job at responding to the things that need to get responded to, and on passing on the things that need to get passed on. I think that Kevin's point's a good one, and one of the weaknesses that I feel like we've had as a board is our inability to engage the broader community in some of those important conversations. And I'm not really sure that I have a great solution for it. I'm better at bringing up problems than I am at bringing up solutions. But I think that we're working towards that. And I think that my hope is that we learn through our superintendent search process of good ways to engage our community and get input about things that are important for the school system as a whole. So from a simple standpoint, no, keep doing what you're doing. From a more complicated standpoint, I think we need to continue to work on improving our engagement in communication strategies. And I can't make you do all of that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I know not everybody loves getting the response of things that I received your email, but one, you can't speak on behalf of everybody. Like you said, oftentimes there's too much information.
I think Mr. Doherty might be indicating that he can't hear you. Neither can Ms. Pettit. She's unmuted. Does that mean, is your microphone?
Yeah, we can tell that she's not muted, but it sounds like she's a long distance from the microphone, whatever, if that might be helpful.
I don't know, the light.
I can turn it up.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
You can hear me now?
That's good, right there.
Maybe something was loose because I didn't do anything except touch it.
It's perfect now.
I was just saying I appreciate you taking the lead on that. And I know not everybody necessarily loves getting the thank you, I received your email, but there are two pieces to that. One, we get a lot of emails and it takes a lot of your time and other people's time, which you gladly do, but sometimes you don't have that information readily available, or it's an issue that you can't comment on individually. So I think you're doing a great job and I appreciate it.
I didn't actually bring this up to ask for compliments. I just wanted a confirmation that the board wanted me to continue. That, but I do want to say, just on the issue of sort of the diversity and inclusion and the curriculum and the what Loveland is doing, it would be easy for us to say, as they do in LECC, that we aspire to care and respect and responsibility, and that, you know, covers what we do. We teach our youngest that, and that, I believe, is what we do. But I would suggest that what has happened as far as the issues of diversity and inclusion to this point is this board has had a presentation from a diversity board that was formed in the community, suggesting that there was a need for this conversation. We've had emails from folks concerned about issues of diversity and inclusion and would like some communication. We had started some work, and at one board meeting, we actually looked at the policies that are in effect and said, yes, these policies are written the way we would like them to be written as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. And we talked about a statement, and this happened at about the time of the resignation of Dr. Krause. And so there could be a feeling that we left things hanging as a board. And so I'd like to suggest that maybe we try to, at our next meeting, if not the following meeting, to bring back a statement platform. I don't know that it would be a resolution, but bring back some sort of statement that comes out of what we want to say about what Loveland does, about the care, the respect, and the responsibility, and then do some moving forward on that to see ways that we can engage the community, see ways that we can consider more closely some of our policies, see ways that we can have this conversation. And I would like to hand some of that work over, since our interim superintendent is doing such a great job of connecting with lots of members of the community. I'd like to ask him to help us in that, engaging the community. And I'll give him a chance to say whether or not he's accepting that responsibility, and see if he has any other ideas as far as how we can proceed.
Well, I respect it wholeheartedly. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for asking. I've actually met with the Diversity Advisory Board, the entire board, on one occasion, and I met with the chairperson of the board, and I think you summarized fairly well. That group has worked very, very hard on research and bringing us suggestions and all, and they feel like things kind of stalled, which is understandable. So, but I assured them that our intent is to pick the work back up. I consider this a board directive, and as I explained to them, this conversation and you handing that off to me, as far as I'm concerned, that's as if you passed a resolution. You know, you're giving me my marching orders. I think the resolution to adopt a platform is a good step in the very near future. That doesn't mean that it'll be a broad policy. It's just to say that a general platform as to how we'll perform in our district in these issues is appropriate, and then engaging the community and eventually coming back where we need to adopt or change policies that are more applicable to our particular situation. And I think it's important for the community to know that oftentimes board policy is written by an outside agency, and while it's a general blanket policy that applies to districts, maybe across the state, with something that's this important, I think it's important to have a local community engagement to talk about what specific issues we want to address here, and then obviously adopt policies and procedures based on that. So again, thank you for the opportunity. I welcome the work, and we will bring back, my team and I will bring back a resolution for you on the platform, and we'll continue moving forward.
Thank you. That's actually fairly helpful in terms of communication, so that, you know, when some of these continuing questions come in, we can direct them to the fact that we are doing this work and we're not simply answering, this is how it is. Don't want to talk about it anymore. So this is a way that you can have your input heard, and that we're working on this.
And if I could add, you know, the email that was sent out to the board members and forwarded on to me, I did reach out to that particular individual and ask for a meeting, because I certainly want to gather their input and see where it is they stand on the issue. As Mr. Doherty pointed out, this is not something that should be discussed via email or text messages. We need to, if possible, sit down and have a conversation so we can really gather their opinions and thoughts.
Okay. Super, thank you. Anything else from board members? If not, then we'll move on to presentations. Again, I know we have 4 planning commission members here, but hopefully they won't mind hearing the presentation on the mid-year academic update before we have the presentation from the planning commission. Ms. Connor, are you the mid-year academic update?
Yes, Mr. Dool and I are going to be kind of giving you guys a little bit of an update, a mid-year update. We typically do this. We didn't do this last year during COVID. If you remember this time last year, things were starting to get a little bit confusing and people were kind of panicking. So I think what we're going to do right now is just, if I can, I'm going to try to share my screen and make sure this kind of gets moving here. Do we have that up?
Not yet.
Okay. Joe, are we able to get that?
I'm working on that page. I thought it was already enabled.
Okay. So as Mr. Gephardt's getting that up, we'll talk briefly. If you recall, back in November, our principals came and spoke with you briefly about such things as how we were doing on our original fall map testing, as well as some of our other vendor assessments. So what we're going to do is just kind of give you like the winter benchmark. At that time, they said, January, February, we do a winter benchmark. So we're just going to give you a quick update. I don't want to spend time going in detail on every single slide because it will eat up some time, but I would like to, if we can get this going, to show you guys kind of a highlight of some of the material, and then all of this is linked into board docs so people can access the presentation there as well. So.
You should be good to share now.
That was me. Okay.
Looks like it's coming now, Andrea.
Okay, very good. Thank you everyone for being patient as we kind of get this up and get it moving. So, all right. Okay, so essentially what we are going to do is kind of a quick update here on, try to minimize this, on where we are with some of our winter benchmarking data. So I just want to kind of quickly call your attention to our kindergarten readiness assessment. Mr. Coles was here and shared a little bit of this information in the fall. But if you take a look at this, you will see we have trends from 18-19 for basically a 3-year trend. This is the first year that Ohio converted to the KRA. It's basically a new version of the KRA Ready is what it's, readiness assessment is what it's called, the KRA-R. And if you take a look here, we don't really have kind of our state overall averages compiled yet because that's being developed from a trend. But if you take a look at how our students came in to Loveland at a 267.1, that is our assumption is it's right at or slightly where we would expect our kindergartners to come in the fall. So I just want to kind of give you that quick little point there. What we do know is our kindergarten teachers have reported that our students at this time are mastering their letters and their sounds just as they typically do this time of year. So everything, even though with all the adjustments we've had to make, our kindergarten students are exactly where they are typically at this time of the school year. The next few slides are basically some snapshots of the DRA. If you take a look at this one, this grade 1 reading growth is LECC and LPS first grade combined. The thing to remember with the DRA, especially at the first grade level, is for students to experience growth, it's basically they have to grow at least what would be considered at a 3-level minimum. On this, if you just take a look just simply at the green, fall beginning of the year, we had 161 kids at the green level. If you take a look at winter mid-year, you have 187. So your goal is essentially to get more kids to move up into those additional categories. And it's important to note that it takes 3 levels of the assessment to bump those students into that particular level. I'm going to quickly show you grade 2. You're going to notice that our second graders are also doing quite well in the DRA. If you take a look in the fall, we're at 170 and we're up to 239 in the green levels. Again, the idea is that you want those numbers on the right in the winter and the mid-year to have more students in the green and fewer students in the yellow and the red. The yellow is kind of like in the borderline. The red are the kids that we're still including in some intensive pieces. The important thing to note as we're getting ready to transition into some of the winter map data for our first graders and second graders is, if you think about kindergarten through second grade, students are learning how to read. And when the shutdown happened last spring, that impact on our earliest learners was far more significant than it was for some of our older learners. And you kind of see that in the trend data as we start to dig through that in some of the map reports. Because much after second grade, students, you think third grade and above, students are reading to learn versus learning to read. So you'll kind of notice that as we start digging into this a little bit more. So having said that, I'm going to flip over to our first graders at LECC. And the first group shows the winter of 1920, and then this time of the year, 2021. And if you take a look, that's showing exactly what we note. So last year at this time, when our students took MAP, they were coming at the end at the 11th. Our students were performing better than 97% of the other students that took the assessment. If you look at winter 2020-21, our students are performing 76% better than the other students that took the assessment. The important thing to note here, these were the kindergartners these little guys were kindergartners in the spring. And when we shut down, there has been a huge gap in that very specific reading instruction. So certainly exactly kind of what we thought would probably happen and what all the data is telling us. If you take a look at math, we're also seeing that same trend in math. I will point out that in our board meeting on the 16th, I will be sharing with the board kind of some information about our summer learning enrichment plan that we will be rolling out this summer to address COVID gap. So we have some extensive planning that we're doing right now in teaching and learning and with building principles to try to get that off the ground. And this is exactly why. Like we knew that when things changed and people were adjusting and parents were put in a situation to kind of pick up where the kindergarten teacher was kind of leaving off, and we had all these activities and things we were sending home, that there would be a gap. However, I will say that there are some pretty creative interventions that we see continuing to go on at this level. Up through our second grade, and that of course will be some invitations that we'll be sending out to parents to attend the summer programs. So if you take a look at LPS, first grade, reading and math, you see very similar trends, just as you saw at LECC. Across the board, MAP is reporting that overall, from all the students across the nation who take that particular assessment, what they're finding is that the gap is larger in math than it is in reading. So the interesting note on that is, I believe, as children, if you think about as students progress in their mathematic skills, parents are far more comfortable continuing to read with their children, kind of exposing them to literature and to different genres and to books, and whereas mathematics may not be the most typical, you know, content area that parents would continue to work with their students. MAP, of course, has provided a white paper on that, and you're going to see that as we trend through the rest of the slide. So that's LPS. LPS second grade reading and math, you're going to see kind of the same trends happening. So our winter benchmarks are lower than they were for the winter of last year. If this is where you're going to start to see not such a significant change in the reading, but take a look at the math. So remember what we said in the winter, more of our second graders are reading at a higher level. And so then therefore you're going to see that that dip is not quite as much, but as you get to second grade, the math, it's far more of a dip there. Again, trending with what MAP is saying about that gap, that COVID gap, as we're calling it. LES, I thought it was really important to kind of show that we keep trend data on how our students are performing on that third grade fall reading assessment. We know that assessment in the past has been critical for the third grade reading guarantee. We know that the state has given us a reprieve on holding students back this year for the third grade reading guarantee. But what I want to point out that I think is very interesting is, and please keep in mind, this assessment's given in October. And so really, this is a K2 assessment. This is not, you know, this is attributed to all the wonderful work that our kindergarten through second grade teachers are doing with all their reading interventions. And, you know, Jen Foran, the principal at LES, is always very open about saying, like, look, this is a K2 assessment, right? This is also an assessment where we have students who for the first time are expected to write lengthy um, multi-paragraph responses on a device as little people, right? And so there's a little bit of a learning curve with that piece as well. If you take a look at the bottom graph here, that's our state average across. If you look at LES, this is where we've trended since 2016. I do want to point out that the N size that's noted under those years is really important to mention. If you notice this past fall, we had 274 of our third graders take the assessment. That is because we have, you know, our remote learners, we had to make specific plans for those kids to come in. And not all families were comfortable bringing their children into the building to take assessments, even though we offer that option. We certainly want to respect their concerns over bringing their children into that environment. And so we do know that, I mean, who knows how those additional students may have performed. But what we do see is we're still at 51%. Our LES students who took the assessment were at 51%. The state average is 37. So we are still performing well above. And again, that's really a nod and an acknowledgement to our kindergarten through second grade teachers and all the amazing work they did. And this is after, if you remember, this is when we launched back in from being off, I'll say, from the previous March. And this is also with our third grade teachers doing some quick interventions, quick assessments, determining where our students were going to score. So kudos to our K through 2 team, as well as our third grade teachers for getting that kind of off the ground.
Just to clarify, Andrea, then you're saying that that number, which might look like our enrollment had gone down, is in part because we have remote students who did not take the test.
Yes, absolutely. That's not an enrollment number. That's actually the students who actually tested. Thank you for clarifying that. If you take a look at, so I'm going to move over to MAP for LES. So that was kind of the fall air test. If you take a look at MAP, and I'm just going to quickly go through these. So I think if you look at this slide, it still has the fall data on here. This was shared with you in the back in, I believe it was October, November, maybe when we discussed this. If you take a look at our winter third grade reading, you see is going from 93 to 86. One other thing that we have noticed is this category here, the high, average, and the high categories. We're noticing as a whole, you know, we would have typically we are obviously concerned about our vulnerable learners, our students who struggle with reading and with mathematics principles, but we're also noticing we don't have as many students scoring in that high and high average and high category. And so part of our plan that we will be rolling out at the next meeting is to include what are some enrichment activities that would encompass those learners as well, because we want this to try to be as inclusive as possible. Again, here's the third grade math. Overall, still trending. I mean, if you say to me that that Loveland students in third grade math are scoring better than 85% of the other students across the nation who've taken this assessment, I would say with the COVID gap consideration, that's certainly still pretty good. Let's take a look at our fourth graders. Again, doing awesome work with our fourth grade. I want to kind of move us into the fourth grade math. Again, even though we're seeing, and we know we're really proud of this, if you take a look at our fourth grade math, even though we're noting that MAP is calling out that trend in math going down, we are not significantly different, right, than we would have been in the winter of 2019. When I take a look at LIS, I'm just going to quickly go through a few of these. You'll see the same types of trend, our reading. And remember, kids at this age, we're reading to learn. We've already have most of our foundational reading skills. We're providing interventions for those students who struggle in reading. But again, you're going to start to see kind of some things change here as we go. So we have our fifth grade reading, our sixth grade reading, and then you take a look at some of our math. Some of our math here with the fifth grade math is still 85% above what we of the other students who took the assessment across the nation. If you take a look at sixth grade, again, those seem almost exactly the same when you kind of look through those. If we take a look at LMS, seventh grade reading in the fall and seventh grade reading in the winter, you're going to see that the RIT, even though the percentage, take a look at the RIT over at the left, you're going to see those are still pretty closely connected there, as well as our seventh grade math. And then I wanted just to take you through our eighth grade reading and our eighth grade math. Okay, and all these slides again are linked into board docs, so everyone can dig into this a little bit more closely if they would like to do so. I'm going to transition us quickly into the high school before we go into an SEL update from Mr. Dool. If you take a look in our high school, and I think we explained this at the fall update, that high school assessment data to do the formative pieces from a vendor are a little bit different. Those aren't readily available. So what we've been doing is doing a few of these checkpoints through the Restart Readiness Assessment. There is a link on this document if someone would like to dig into that and see the numbers of that there's no private student data on that document at all. It's simply just a numbers of tests that were given and how many students took each of those particular assessments. These mimic the end of course assessments, and the teachers are using this to kind of identify maybe some gaps and to dig into the data a little bit more and see what we can do to make sure our high school students are successful on those end of course. Remember, those end of course assessments are worth graduation points and are a little bit different than our assessments that are administered at the lower levels. This is the same slide that was in the presentation in the fall. This is our ACT. Remember, what we want to call out is this number right here, the N size of 180. Remember that nationwide ACT was not administered during the initial COVID shutdown. In fact, it was much into the summer before they opened up some of the smaller testing sites with limited access for people. So we will start to see this number rebound back. Remember that our juniors tested, our entire junior class tested last week. Those numbers are not in the portal just yet, okay? That's called out in this graph, just as kind of a reminder. And here's a quick little update of that assessment that was last week. It was offered to all of the juniors. We had 311 of the I'm sorry, of the 362 that took it. Accommodations are given to students per individual student plans. We did have some vocational school students participate. We have 5 students that need to do a makeup. Also, we had some students who are already scoring in the 30s on the ACT who said, you know, like I'm choosing not to. It's just an option. It's not like a requirement to do it. We have some students who said, you know what, I'm good with my score. I don't want to try for another round. We also had some students say, I want to keep trying because it might mean some scholarship money, right? So we had some that stepped up and did it even though they were well above 30 on their ACT. Okay, just to kind of bring you up to speed on our AP. So our 2019 numbers are there. We also see that here we're trending with how our 2020. I want to call out this jump on the equity and excellence. That's a score that schools strive for when they're trying to increase their AP courses. When you do that, you're looking for the numbers of seniors who have 3s or higher on at least one AP exam while they're in high school. You want to see that trend continue. So the more the more students we have taking the test. So really what you're doing is you're saying we're getting more students to take the test and more students are successful on those particular assessments and it's potentially earning them college credit. Again, here's some information just to show you how many total AP students we have, also the total number of exams that we have at this point. Also, I think it's important to call out that even though the year's been different, even though we've had to be very careful and safe, and there were several protocols that sometimes feels like, you know, we're at this point where everybody's kind of getting a little bit weary of this. We've had some really great things still going on in our schools, and this slide here just shows kind of what the high school office of school counseling has been doing for some of our students. There are links in here that we would, you know, feel free to click on those and kind of take a look at where we are with that. Also, this year we launched a little bit more extensive on-campus CCP options for our students. And so when you get a chance, when you click on that LHS CCP data, Sinclair Community College, what that will show you are some of the successes that you're going to see, kind of a graph of our CCP programs at our high school. So now at this point, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dool, and he's going to talk a little bit about the social emotional piece.
Thank you. What we have done for you, we have a few slides broken down by grade bands, so pre-K through 4, 5 through 8, and then our high school students. Wanted to talk about our initiatives for social emotional development, and as part of that, what we are doing to assure that students remain safe, especially knowing that with COVID, there have been an increase in mental health concerns in the general population as well, specific to students. So what you will see, the school, even in the midst of having students in face-to-face environments as well as in remote environments, has really done well to increase and continue the efforts that we have in place for social emotional learning. That includes what are those general structures we have to promote positive behaviors, our positive behavior intervention and support programs. That includes defining what our expectations are, teaching those expectations, and then positively reinforcing the behaviors that we do see, as well as our explicit curriculum that we teach for social emotional engagement, including both cognitive skills that we're teaching our students, that's the social thinking aspect of what we do, as well as specific social skills, which would be seen in our second step curriculum. This effort, as you will see, spans the entire population of our students, pre-K through 12. Additionally, in our early learner programs, we have Being a Writer, which is an embedded component to our writing curriculum that includes a social emotional component. So there are numerous explicit opportunities for us to continue with our instruction and reinforcement of those behaviors that we know are critical for students to be able to continue to access and participate and make positive progress within the academic curriculum, but then also preparing them for the skills that they will need ultimately when they graduate and move into post-secondary options. In addition to that, what you'll see in the slides that are presented are the incredible supports that we have available to both prevent mental health issues from occurring, but then also how do we intervene with those mental health needs as they show themselves, both through our counseling departments and school psychologists, but also through our great and robust partnership with the Children's Home of Cincinnati, branded as Best Point Behavioral Health. We've been able to provide on-site as well as remote options for mental health services for students in need. Additionally, we have continued to expand upon our Hope Squad programs at the intermediate, middle, and high school levels. So those students are continuing to learn how to identify peers who might be going through a mental health crisis, how to refer them, and then also how to reach out and include their peers so that we can prevent mental health concerns from developing. Some exciting things that have happened, I think, at the intermediate and middle school levels. Mr. Collier, Mr. Knapp, and their teams have really beefed up the ways in which they reinforce those positive behaviors that they're seeing at those levels. So you'll see the student recognition and even the staff recognition that's occurring at the intermediate level with Students of the Week and the Positively Proud programs, and then at the middle school with their department awards and Rockstar Awards. And then again, you'll see as we get into the high school, how those initiatives have continued. Some things of note, specific at the high school, because we know that students are more independent with remote learning, and that executive functioning skills become quite critical for those students. There have been additional efforts by the counseling department to reach out and provide resources for those students to help them remain engaged and organized in the work that they need to do. Additionally, the high school has really partnered well with younger students as a part of their Tiger Care Callers program, knowing that we have younger students who are remotely learning and lack social engagement in other ways. We have a proactive effort led by our student population to have time to reach out to those students on a regular basis to engage them in conversation, but then also other social activities so that there is a connection. And as a community, we're supporting one another regardless of what platform we are engaging in for learning. And then lastly, you'll see even at the high school that our students continue to engage with those mental health services that we've made available, as well as those preventative activities such as our Hope Squad program, so that we are wrapping around each and every one of our learners to make sure that they are safe, cared for, and continue to be available for the learning that we want to do. And with that, I think, Andrew and I will take any questions you have.
Board comments or questions? This whole report is available on Board Docs, so also for our audience, they are able to access this report and take a little longer with some of the slides than we were able to take to get the presentation. Let's see, I see Mr. Doherty has his hand raised.
Yeah, maybe not a question, but a couple of comments to Andrea and Eric. First of all, thank you for the comprehensive report that you just shared with us. I was thinking as you were going through the numbers in the beginning that I used to work for this gentleman who always told me, numbers are your friends, even if you don't like what they're telling you. It's really important to have an objective viewpoint on the state of affairs. And the message that I took from the early part of this conversation was multifaceted. It said to parents, to the community at large, this whole COVID thing has had a cost to our kids. They're not where we'd like them to be as a general rule. Maybe the good news is that relative to their peers in other parts of the state and likely other parts of the country, they haven't fared too badly. But there has been a price paid. And perhaps the message of optimism in all of it is that the staff, the teachers appear to have worked really hard and very successfully at mitigating the impact of all of this. But we should be clear that our kids have paid a price, and getting through this as quickly as we can remains critically important to us, remains a priority, and it remains a priority, I'm quite certain, for the entire staff to try to find innovative ways, as you were describing, particularly through the latter part of this, to mitigate the challenges. So thank you to the both of you. Thank you to all the staff out there. And I think the community should, understand that we got it. We know what's been going on. We have a good handle on it. And we're trying to do our best to do right by our kids.
You said, oh, sorry.
Mrs. Washburn.
You said at the next board meeting, we'll hear a presentation about summer programs and opportunities that will be available, correct?
Yeah, so many of you may have heard the update when DeWine was speaking and said he used the words extended school year, and it kind of set everyone into like a concern. And I was like, oh no, hold on. That was or, and he added some other pieces to that. We always offer summer programming. Certainly we offer extended school year for students with disabilities that qualify. We also intended to do the Jumpstart program that was very successful for us 2 years ago that Mr. Fancher and Mr. Coles spoke about in the fall with all of you. So those are programs we were going to do, but what is wonderful and is that we now have an opportunity to expand that. So we could say, hey, this is what we're doing and that's it. But we've decided not to do that. We've started working on a plan that will be, right now, it will be students leaving kindergarten through 8th grade, some options for them to some summer programming options that we'll discuss, as well as we're going to fold in some SEL components to that and some experiences. We're also looking at some really kind of some rich opportunities for our high school students so that our parents will have some opportunities by the end of this school year to see what our summer programming looks like, enroll their students in any of these, and none of this will be at a cost, as we will be able to tap into some of the ESSER funds money that is designated specifically for closing that COVID gap. So in our communications and the collaboration with the Treasury Department and Mr. Hawley, we've been talking a little bit about what that might look like. We don't have an extensive plan ready yet because, the governor just made that announcement a few weeks ago. And my curriculum friends and I are, you get a little nervous and then you read into it. And I think we're going to be okay. And I think in the end, we're going to be able to really address many of these concerns that we saw on some of that. We're acknowledging that it's been a little bit of a setback. So absolutely, we're excited to share a little bit about that. We won't be complete by our next board meeting, but we'll share some of the highlights.
Anything else from board members?
I wanted to say thank you. You guys have both done a tremendous job at updating us, and I think we all knew the challenges that a sudden shutdown in March and then lack of in-person education for 6 months until we could get kids back into schools would give us. And the data that we've collected actually shows you've done a great job. I think I have one question and then one comment, and the comment is addressed to the portion that Eric discussed during the presentation, which is I've been really happy to see how early and often we work on social and emotional well-being with our student population. And I was really pleased to see the outreach of services that we've been able to provide for children, knowing how much of a backup there's been in the private world and providing those services. So the resilience that we've built in kids from a young age and the ability to know that they have someone to reach out to in the schools is really important with all of the trauma that everybody's been through all of this. And then the second thing is I wanted to make sure that I understood some of the data, Andrea, in the initial slides. And let me just kind of refer back to, we'll go back to like the first grade map reading slide and the first grade math slide. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood the school achievement percentile. There's a significant drop there. And I don't think that actually refers to how we've done compared to other school systems. And I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that correctly, or that I was understanding it correctly.
Yeah. So they're measuring it against the new 2020 updated norm. So in the midst of this, they decided to re-norm. So what we had.
I'm sorry. I said they were measuring this up against the 2020 norm. So in the midst of all of COVID, and they've decided to change the norms, right? So you do see a little bit of that kind of being off there. So when you take a look at, I mean, it's certainly not saying there was that big of a drop. It's just saying as like a whole, that's kind of what it's referencing, is that particular piece. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it was a norming. They adjusted their norms, and that's where you're starting to see that.
And the reason I asked the question is I'm quite sure that we didn't suddenly drop from the 97th percentile of school districts to the 76th percentile of school districts. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear to people looking at the slides.
I will say that we, if I may, that we asked our teachers last spring to turn on a dime and do some things that were that wasn't what they were normally trained to do, right? And then we asked them to launch this year in a little bit of it was kind of like, we're doing it, right? And so it's been a little bit of like, we've all had to learn together. And where I see our staff now is truly amazing. And I just wanted to say, like, I truly feel like our teachers have done a tremendous job, as well as our support staff. And my conversations with a lot of our teachers right now are things like, this part was really good. I really learned this about instruction now. This is something I really want to keep, right? And so I feel like we're starting, and maybe it's the hope of the vaccine and that hopeful feeling, but I'm sure that other administrators will tell you it's starting to feel a little bit more like we're like talking about what are some really neat things we've learned that we'll be able to keep from this experience. So.
Anything else from board members? All right, thank you very much, Ms. Connor and Mr. Dool. We really appreciate that.
Kathy, before,
We've now reached what our faithful audience. Was I muted?
Kathy, could I just ask a quick question before we move on?
Certainly, sorry.
Really, it's, I guess maybe for Eric. I know there's some questions floating out around there about, little more question, I should say, about enrollment figures. You told us that you're not seeing any significant shift in enrollment. That's correct, right?
That is correct, and we can pull that data
Would you, okay,
to have posted.
that would be great if you could just provide those numbers in some kind of a format that maybe we include them in the minutes or something.
We will.
Thank you very much.
All
That's all, Kathy. Thank you.
All right, I believe then we're ready to move to Planning Commission, and I'll ask Dr. Swetchnow, Mrs. Washburn, do you have any intro to this group, or is this group on their own?
Much as the entire year they've been on their own. So I would gladly give a preamble and a shout out to how much work and how many hours have been spent by the members of the Planning Commission as a total, and specifically the members of the Planning Commission here this evening. We have Craig Lewis, Brad Goldie, Lynn Mangan, and Donnell Auten here. And I'm not sure which one of you is planning to talk or what order you want to go in, but I'll let you guys lead from there.
We don't need the presentation yet, but at some point we will.
Looks like they still need to be
Just let me
promoted.
know if this is not working. So Donnell Auten, for the commission, and I'll just speak briefly. We don't have many opportunities to speak to all of you. This is the first time we've spoken to you directly, although we get to interact with our two liaisons quite frequently, and we appreciate that. But I wanted to take the chance here before we get going with this presentation to acknowledge some of the work happening on the other three committees as well. The School Improvement and Student Experience Committee, led by Lindsay Willman, is busy identifying best practices and potential opportunities in high school, college prep, college credit programs, and especially working to expand early access to skills-based, industry-recognized career pathways. These are all things you're going to see in coming months as we begin to coalesce around recommendations and analyses for this board and for the district. The Facilities Committee, led by Dan Coletto, identifying potential cost containment opportunities, innovative ideas on funding specific classroom upgrades, and exploring where, when, and how we can address the potential functional obsolescence in our schools. And the Communications and Community Engagement Committee, recently led by Michael Shaversky, now led by incoming chair Lynn Mangan, with renewed focus on developing recommendations and strategies on how this district can increase and improve its engagement with all members of our Loveland community. I know you guys talked some about that today, and I know you talk about it a lot. Ever room for improvement, and we're looking forward to helping with that. And then finally, the Finance Committee here, active on a wide range of issues, two of which you'll see here today. But I wanted to call out this group particularly. You mentioned Craig, Brad, and Lynn here with us today, but there are also 4 other members who are not with us: Kirk McCracken, Jill Jones, Nathan Libby, and our newest member, Leslie Hodge. This is work that you're going to see today that's been ongoing since August, among several targets of our analytical efforts. So this is a group that's put in many, many long hours, as Dr. Swetzenau alluded to, and they deserve a lot of credit for the time and effort and dedication, as do all members of our commission. This is a group of community volunteers and leaders that stepped up in the middle of what can only be described as a very tough year. Don't get anywhere near the credit they deserve for the hours and the time and the dedication that they have to our students and our community beyond the schools. So I wanted to take those few minutes to thank them for their efforts, both in the past and looking forward into the future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Mangan, previously the chair of the Finance Committee, before Craig Lewis took over just recently.
Thank you. Thanks, Donnell. Let me see if I can pull up the presentation and get it to where we can share the screen. Alrighty. Okay. Okay, so what I'd like to do is share a little bit about the focus and the priorities of the Finance Committee. So what have we been working on? How did we decide where to start when we got started back in the summer? And then we've completed 2 analysis, and first on a certified staff contract, and the second is the administrator analysis. So the certified staff analysis, I know some folks in the community have already seen this. It is out on the website. And the administrator analysis is something that we've just wrapped up as a committee. So what is our focus? And sorry, let me move these things here just a little bit. So our charter for the Finance Committee is to really research and analyze opportunities that can help make the district financially stable. These are both short-term and long-term, that we look for opportunities to reduce spending and at the same time increase income coming in to the district. One of the areas we started on was looking at money for salaries. Salaries is the largest expense of the district. It's people that make the magic happen within our district. And so naturally, it's our largest expense. One of the things, when we got started, what we did was we took a step back. We had various levels of understanding of public schools, of understanding of Loveland schools specifically. So we took a look at all of the CUP report data and all of the district financials. And we just looked at each area and said, ooh, one, to make sure we understood it, and two, to look for areas where there was potential outliers, sometimes in a good way, sometimes as an opportunity for the district. So that led us to doing the certified staff analysis first. The administrator analysis we did second, and then coming soon, we're in the final stages of an athletics analysis, also looking at an income tax analysis, traditional versus earned income, and then starting work to understand the Loveland Schools Foundation. And then some longer term goals are to look at ways we can help in reviewing and developing budget and just overall fiscal oversight. So those are our current priorities. So let's jump right into the certified staff analysis. So why did we start here? So when you can see the data up here on the screen, and what this is a look at the average teacher salary that comes from the CUP report. And Brad Goldie is our master with data, and he put the CUP report data for the last 10 years into a single source for us so we could look at trends. You can see that it has a line for Loveland, the ECC, the border districts, and then similar districts. And the state defines what similar districts to Loveland are. That subset of districts changes every year. So one year it could be 5 of the same districts. The next year it could be, there could be a completely different set. But what you see is a common look over the last 10 years. Our teachers' average salary is significantly over similar schools, ECC, and border. So we wanted to kind of lift the covers up on that and understand why that was. So we thought it was important to call out what we did not do. So when we did the certified staff analysis, we did not do any comparison of the experience level or academic qualifications of the employees. We also didn't perform any analysis of the appropriate makeup of the faculty. So for example, we didn't do the research to say we need this many kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, this many teachers that can teach advanced placement, this many, language arts, foreign language teachers. We did not do that analysis. We also did not make a recommendation or target for how our contracts should compare to other districts, nor did we analyze the benefit package. So this analysis was solely on salaries. We looked, but for those who are interested in looking at the benefit package for certified staff, the Madeira Planning Commission has done a very nice analysis of the districts in Cincinnati and the benefit packages available, in particular for the certified staff. What we did do was that we did a contract comparison of 40 school districts. So we pulled all 40 school districts in the greater Cincinnati areas. We pulled their certified staff contracts. We took our certified staff data, demographics, so our actual certified staff, their years of experience and their education level, and compared how our staff would be paid in all of those other 40 districts so that we understood the cost of, let's say we went over to King's and put all of our staff in King's contract, or we went to Northwest schools and put all of our staff in Northwest. So all 40 districts, we used our census and put it in the contracts of the comparison district contracts. And then we ran different scenarios for various contract structures. We also thought it was important to include income and property value comparison data across those 40 districts so that we could understand how we ranked relative to that as well. So that led us to an analysis that I'm going to have Brad Goldie come up and walk through the actual analysis we completed.
All right. I think it's important to, as we do this, to reiterate a point that Lynn said, to understand kind of why we did what we did as we're starting to look at these numbers. And that is, when we looked at that CUP graph data from the CUP report, even though Loveland had a higher average salary, there's various reasons that could be the case. Right? It's not necessarily because our contract is any more expensive. There's the makeup of the teachers, how experienced they are, and different reasons that they could have a higher compensation structure. So we thought it was important to control for who our teachers are. And we did not want to make a comparison of saying, how are our teachers paid relative to their teachers? We wanted to say, make a report that analyzed the contract itself and not the teachers. So this isn't a statement on what the right makeup of the teacher should be, but rather what does the contract currently look like, and how would our same set of teachers look on different contracts. So as we did the rankings across all 40 districts, we did the same thing that we did with the CUP report, where we looked at our average, but we also looked at the average of the border districts that touch us geographically, the other ones in our athletic conference, the ECC, to make sure that we could see how we compare against those subsets of schools that might be more comparable than the entire broad region. So if you look, you'll see that the Loveland income and valuation measures fall above the ECC average, but below the border average. And our district median income for the most recent CUP report year was 10th out of the 40 districts, placing us at the 25th percentile, the 25th highest. And that our average, our mean, was 8th, putting us in the top 20%. Right, and we wanted to look at both mean and median to make sure that there wasn't a large difference was being impacted by extreme salaries. So there's a lot of numbers here, and you can, when you look at the actual report, you can go through and look at the nitty-gritty. But we provided a large list for all the districts, giving demographic information and data about the district, and also about the general information about the contracts. So you'll see that the teachers are paid they have a salary schedule that has a minimum pay for a first-year incoming teacher with just a bachelor's degree, and then that will increase with years of experience and also with educational markers. And so the minimum salary for Loveland ranked us 14th out of the 40 districts, which placed us in the top 35%, and our maximum salary placed us 7th out of the 40 districts, placing us in the top 18%. When you look at our numbers compared to the average border and ECC groups, you'll see that the number of years to get to the top experience step, which is the number of years of experience required to get to the maximum salary scale, for Loveland is 20 years, and it's the third fastest out of the 40 school districts. So there were only 2 other districts that got to the maximum salary in the same number of years of experience or fewer. And the other districts were all a larger number that took a larger number of years of experience to get to their maximum salaries. We also have 6 educational steps for our teachers, ranging from bachelor's to master's plus 30 additional hours of continuing education. And that places us 27th out of the 40 districts. So 2/3 of the districts have fewer than 6 education steps. So that's just a description of the kind of the relative understanding of how the contract looks. And then this is the numbers that actually starts to break down how our teacher census would look if they were placed on the various contracts. It shows what would happen in the 1920 school year if our Loveland certified staff were placed in the salary contracts of border, ECC, and also all of the other 40 Cincinnati area school districts as a composite average. Indian Hill was the only district of the 40 with a significantly more expensive contract at 2.2% more expensive. Forest Hills, Mason, and Princeton are all essentially tied. They're within 0.2%, meaning that if our teachers were placed on those contracts, there would be little to no change in the total compensation. 6 of the districts were 1 to 5% less expensive than Loveland, and then 29 of the 40 districts were more than 5% less expensive than the Loveland contract. If you look at the table, the numbers on the right-hand side represent the difference between the total compensation for the Loveland certified staff versus what it would look like if they were placed on the average of the average schools or the average of the border schools or the average of CCC. So that represents a $2.3 million difference for the average of across all 40 districts, 1.1 million relative to the border schools, and 1.8 million relative to the ECC schools. So what is driving the cost difference between the different districts? The biggest difference driver between the Loveland contract and the contracts of the other schools is the number of experience steps, the number of years of classroom experience required to get to the highest salary level. So like we said, it peaks at 20 years in Loveland. In other districts, it can peak at up to 28 years. And I believe I saw a few districts that are even as high as 30. And this has been in place for a while, so this is not a recent change to the Loveland contract that it's been 20 years. This combined with the fact that close to half of the certified staff are already at the top experience and education level, meaning this group is the most highly compensated group. As a result, the cost of many of the certified staff being at the peak makes it much more impactful. So meaning if a lot of our certified staff members were at lower experience levels in the contract, it wouldn't be as great of a difference. But since we have so many teachers that are already at 20 or greater, then that substantive difference occurs. I guess should we open it for any questions before we talk about the administrator analysis and what we saw, we'd like to open it for any questions that you may have about the certified staff analysis.
It's a little hard for me to see either Mr. Doherty or Ms. Pettit. They're in little screens to the right of my screen. So if you've got questions, wave your hand so I see you. If either Dr. Swetchnow, Michelle is shaking her head no. Eileen and Eric can wave at me from the room if they've got questions or if they want to wait till the end of the presentation.
I can just add, I've talked to you guys several times, and I again can't even express my appreciation for the amount of work that you've done on that and how much this is meshed with the information we have within the school district to help us to understand where we are as far as certified staff salary analysis. It's all I can say is it's been really helpful. I've pored over it and read it and thought about it for a long time, so I don't have any questions. But I think it's probably valuable for not only the other board members to get a chance to do that, but for anybody in the community who has questions about it to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I might. Yeah, I might just emphasize the points that were made earlier that there's not a single thing that's driving the economic situation here. So as the community looks at this data, I'd urge them to look at all of the data and to get a robust, comprehensive view of the situation that we're faced with, multidimensional.
Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and, am I echoing? Move to the administrator analysis. So this one, when we looked at this, and I don't know if, but we did not, this was not, the administrator average salary was not something that when we were looking at all of the CUP data together, this did not jump out at us. There certainly was a period earlier, about 5 years ago, where Loveland was higher, but then it's kind of come back into line. but there's been a lot of questions in the community regarding administrators' salaries and benefits, and we felt that it was extremely important for us to review this as well. So what we kept the same format in terms of what we did not do. So we did not compare the experience level or academic qualifications of the administrators, exact same as what we did with the certified staff analysis. We also did not complete an analysis of the appropriate makeup of the administrators or make a recommendation or target for how our contract should compare to other districts. What we did do here is that administrator data is a bit more challenging to get your hands on, because you have to, it's not the certified staff contracts are publicly available. In order to get contracts for administrators, it has to be a records request to each district. And in order to do that in a timely manner, it just wasn't going to be feasible. So what we did was we went on to the Buckeye Institute and downloaded and also getting salary data for administrators. The only way it's publicly available is either through Open Checkbook or through the Buckeye Institute. And the Open Checkbook does not make it easy for you to download significant amounts of information. So we went to the Buckeye Institute, and for all 40 school districts, we downloaded staff making $60,000 or more. You can imagine that's a lot of staff across 40 districts. We then removed any job titles that were not similar to our administrator job titles. So we kept like job titles for administrators. And this allowed us to then do a scenario comparison for various salary and benefit structures. We also had a lot of conversation around, in the private world, organizations like Mercer and other organizations do compensation analysis that you can use to benchmark your staff against. The AASA does complete a superintendent salary and benefits analysis each year. And so we use that to benchmark against both the base salary and additional benefits that are available for the superintendent. And then they also have some analysis on salaries for principal and assistant principal roles. Brad then completed a regression analysis so that we could understand the factors that are impacting superintendent and treasurer compensation. And again, similar to the certified staff analysis, we did include income and property value comparison data across the district. So certified staff, no benefits analysis was done. We did do benefits analysis on non-traditional benefits outside of kind of medical and health for administrators. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Brad again.
So in this setting, what we were trying to do is we started off with just across all administrators, right? Regardless of position, what was the average compensation? Again, this doesn't speak to anything relative to the appropriate number of administrators or what the makeup should be, but rather, given the number of administrators we have, what is the compensation level compared to the other districts in the region? We found that on average, the Loveland City School District's average administrator salary was just over $100,000, $102,000, ranking as 13th of the 40 districts. Again, it's important to point out that the income levels for median income was 10th, and the average mean income was 8th of the 40 districts for reference there. We also show in the report specifically key positions individually. So superintendent ranked 15th, treasurer ranked 13th. When we say principal and assistant principal, both of those positions are the average across our principals and the average across our assistant principals. And in both of those positions, we actually found that the salary ranges across districts is fairly small. It's much tighter than the variation in the treasurer and the superintendent pay across districts. So we, like Lynn said, we got our information from the Buckeye Institute, where we were able to pull the administrator pay levels. So if you were, again, to compare us not to individual districts, but to groups of districts, so the average of the 40, the border schools or the ECC schools, you can see that what would the difference be if our administrators earned, for example, the exact same as those other groups. And so, for example, you would see that our administrators, the total difference in compensation difference compared to the average. This is not per administrator, but this is across all administrators combined, is roughly $80,000 for the average, $9,000 for the border, and $96,000 for the ECC. So our contract would be more expensive administrators, but by those amounts. And a few things to point out: the data is lagged. That's available, publicly available. So it's not like we were able to find data for this school year, for example, right? Because it comes out with a lag on what's publicly available. So some things to note is the administrators, no administrators received any inflationary increases this year, and that the administrators other than the superintendent and treasurer did receive steps, but not the inflationary increase, and the superintendent and the treasurer did not receive any increase at all for the 2 school years. We also did some analysis for the administrators on any benefits or perks that were afforded to our administrators that were not given to other employees, like the certified staff. And so some of the ones that we compared here were 3 main additional compensations that could be measured. One is the retirement pickup, which is the employee and the employer, which is the district, have a portion of the retirement benefit contribution that is required. And so, as you can see, we broke this table into 2 different groups, one for the superintendent and treasurer, and then one for all the other administrators, because those 2 positions are often treated differently than the rest of the administrator positions. And you'll see that across all of the districts, the retirement pickup, meaning that the district pays the employee contribution portion of the retirement benefit, is true for the superintendent and treasurer and all other administrators. And this group is the group of schools that we had available in the ECC. So this was not data that was easily pulled from lots of districts. And so this is the group of schools, the comparison schools that we were able to most easily acquire. And it represents, like I said, all the schools in the ECC with the exception of Cincinnati Public, which has Walnut Hills in it, which is a very different school district in makeup and composition than ours. There's another one, a second benefit, which is, the language is interesting, but it's called the pickup on the pickup, which is essentially an additional retirement contribution to cover the original pickup. That is a fairly common benefit for the superintendent and treasurer. And it's where 7 of the 8 schools districts we compared provided that benefit. For other positions that Loveland does provide it, but only 3 of the 8 that we looked at do provide that for the administrators other than the superintendent and treasurer. And the last one is the Medicare pickup, where the district pays the Medicare tax that's due by the administrators. Again, for the superintendent and treasurer, it's covered by all 8 districts. For districts other than, or for the positions other than treasurer and superintendent, Loveland School District was the only one that paid that additional benefit. The cost of those 2 benefits for the other administrators, for the non-superintendent and treasurer. So the pickup on the pickup is a combined, we estimate it to be $86,000 in total cost for that benefit that's provided by 3 of the 8 districts. And I should say annual cost for that. And then for the Medicare pickup, we estimated it to be $36,000 for the total cost for that on an annual basis. Just to make sure that we understood fully what was going on, because with the teachers, since there is a very straightforward contract to analyze, understanding why different superintendents or different treasurers would earn what they earn is a slightly more difficult process. So we did a regression analysis where we used information available from the CUP report about the districts. So this is not about data or information about the individuals, but rather demographic information about the districts to determine how much they're paying their superintendents. So we used the number of students in the district, the average income of the district, the average square mileage for the physical size of the district, home valuation, the number of administrators in the district, and the district admin student ratio as the variables from the CUP report to determine to gain a full understanding of why the compensation levels were what they were. What we found is that for the superintendent, 80% of the variation across districts is fully explained by this information, which essentially means that we have a pretty good understanding of why superintendents earn what they earn across districts. It's not, most of the variation is complete, is explained here. It gives us a pretty good understanding. The predicted compensation for Loveland schools was actually $8,000 greater than the prior superintendent's salary at the time. We did a similar analysis with the treasurer and found it's not, the model's not as predictive. It's 60% of the variation rather than 80, so there's a little bit more unexplained variation in the treasurers. And we found similar outcome that the predicted superintendent, or excuse me, the predicted treasurer salary was within $2,000 of what Loveland was paying. So other factors we reviewed in the report, we looked at other benefits. We used the AASA study, as Lynn mentioned, and looked at the ratio of teacher starting salary to superintendent salary. So are there major differences, cost differences between districts? The costs for administrators appear to be in line at Loveland with the Greater Cincinnati and national averages. The variations of compensation levels correlate directly with variables such as district size, median income. And also the fringe benefits that we're seeing in the administrator are similar to that of private company executives. They continue to be evaluated relative to the total cost of employment. And we do see, as far as the things that are not as consistent and common, that Loveland is one of only 8 ECC schools that we had data for that offer a Medicare pickup for all administrators, and that we're one of 3 out of 8 that offer the income tax pickup. So those are the 2 benefits that we saw that were less common.
Any questions for us?
Anything from board members? I guess your report was too good.
Kathy, I can just add I just wanted to add in. I know how challenging for me working on it personally it was to try to find information about benefits for administrators, and I'm really happy with how well we've all worked together to try to get that information to make the best decision to keep and maintain the great staff that we have here, and yet be responsible to the needs of the community, both from the teachers or certified staff side, for the non-certified staff side, and for the administrative side. So thanks.
The data has been enormously helpful, and thank you for it.
All right, just a quick note that the presentation will be on board docs, and then we'll get the administrator report up on the Planning Commission right by where the certified staff analysis is within the next couple of days. Okay. All righty.
I would just make a comment that we certainly appreciate the patience on the part of the Planning Commission as we worked through how to get some of the things available on the website. In other words, working with how the board understood what was going to be on the website, where it got to be on the website, and we really appreciate your patience. You did all this work, and it wasn't always immediate that you could just post it on the website, and we do really appreciate the patience for that, and we are beginning to see some of these things be available on the Planning Commission site of the district website. So we appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from board members? That makes me tired. I'm sorry. That was a lot of work, and it makes me tired thinking of all that work that you did. Doesn't make me tired listening to it. It makes me tired thinking about all the work that you did. So we appreciate that very, very much. We'll say the same thing that we say to our students. If you folks need to leave, we're not going to be watching you as you leave our meeting. You can see from our agenda, we have a few more things to do this evening, but we certainly appreciate your time. Thanks. If the board is ready, I think we can move to, we actually have two items on the agenda, resolutions on the agenda. And the first one is to approve board commitments. Those commitments are on board docs. And so I hope that you have had an opportunity to look at those. We did have quite a bit of discussion about them, and I am asking if the board is ready to approve those, or if there are comments or questions or suggestions about any changes to those. Mr. Doherty's got his thumb up, so I think he's ready. Ms. Pettit? Okay. Dr. Swetchenow, Mrs. Washburn, we okay? All right, that's maybe the fastest resolution we've ever done. Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that? Oh, no, I'm sorry, we need a motion. See, I was going to do it even faster. I will move to approve the 2021-2022 board commitments.
I would second that.
And Dr. Swetchenow seconded. Now, not having given anyone a chance to raise their hand, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn. Oh, you're good.
Did you vote yes?
I think she's trying to unmute.
I said I looked at the wrong thing earlier today. I was just looking at it real quick.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm looking for and I can't find it.
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes,
Fun to build with this thing.
it's good to have some suspense. Motion carried. We'll then move to the approval of the superintendent search firm contract. And my suggestion would be that we have a motion and a second, and then turn it over to Mr. Doherty to discuss this before we have a vote on that. So is there a motion to approve the superintendent search firm contract?
Michelle,
Michelle has moved, Ms. Pettit has moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Swetchenow seconded. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Doherty.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. So as was discussed at our last meeting back on February 16th, we reached out to CF Educational Solutions, and they have agreed to a contract that met the criteria asked for by the board. This included specifying Bob Farrell as the project lead and a reduced fee now set to $17,750 plus expenses, with the additional stipulation that should the guarantee have to be called on, expenses would be additional for a second search. I should point out this last element was typical, I think, on all, if not most of all of our other proposals. And the new updated fee places CF right in the middle of the range of other firms offering similar services. Additionally, reference checks were also completed without issue. And legal has reviewed the revised agreement that is up for approval tonight. I would recommend to the board that we proceed with the approval as all issues previously discussed have been resolved. CF is totally ready to go, and I thank them for their flexibility in negotiating this agreement. Moving forward, there are a number of CF recommended steps that we should settle on to get the search process underway. I'd like to go through those, make some suggestions about some, and see if we all can agree on those. Bob Farrell from CF is with us to help this if needed. And Joe, if I could ask you to make sure that we now promote Bob Farrell and Bob Summers to panelists from attendees. Bob Farrell is there. Hey, Bob. And here comes Bob Summers. Okay, let me see, we just lose there. Okay, welcome Bob and welcome Bob. I just, for your information, recommended that we proceed with approving the contract that we've negotiated since the last meeting, and there's a motion on the table to be voted on hopefully here in a few minutes. I was starting to say that moving forward, there are a number of steps recommended by CF that we should settle on to get the search process underway. I'm going to go through those, make some suggestions, and see if we can all agree on those. And Bob are here to answer any questions that might come up or amplify on anything that I might say that needs further dialogue. Before we get going with the process, I think we should say to anyone who is listening or knows somebody who has an interest in being considered for the superintendent's position to send an email to the key people at CF handling this search. That would be Bob Farrell, and his email address is farrell1953@gmail.com. And Bob Summers, whose email is robert.summers, robet.sommers @cfedsolutions.com. That would be cfedsolutions.com. Simply indicate your interest in discussing the position in your email, and Bob Farrell will contact you directly to outline the process. In order to preserve the integrity of this process, I would recommend that we ask interested parties to not reach out to board members, but rather the search consultants that we are in the process of engaging this evening. We're clearly interested in finding the best candidates and have not determined the full profile or qualifications at this point, but be assured we will, through the process that I'll describe here in a moment, which we intend to be as transparent as possible with significant community engagement. And I hope that the community feels confident that their voices will be heard in this process when you hear the particulars of what I'm going to run through right now. I've got, I think, five steps here. First, a critical element is the formation of a community advisory group, what we'll call the CAG, comprised of a dozen or so individuals representing a cross-section of the community. For example, highly involved district advocates, as well as those that are concerned about the direction or performance of the district. We want both ends represented. We really want to try to have all community perspectives represented as best as we can in a reasonable size group. There should be those with kids in the schools as well as those without. Other segments such as retirees and staff should also be represented. There may be other groups the board feels should be represented in this community advisory group. And I'd ask for input on that tonight. Please feel free to chime in and make any other additional suggestions that we should agree on. If we want, a designated board member could be identified, presumably as a liaison with the CAG, if we thought that was advisable. The CAG will receive the same information that the board does, and deliberate separately from the board to provide feedback to us, feedback to the board, to aid us in making the decision that we, by law, have to make. The CAG meetings would be moderated by CF and would be scheduled, likely using Zoom to ease the process. I would ask that we, and we have to agree on this, I would recommend that we ask Brad to take on the task of identifying the members of the Community Advisory Group, the CAG, particularly based on the interactions he's been having with the community of late, plus any other input that emerges after tonight's meeting. He should come back on the 16th meeting, March 16th meeting, with the list that he recommends for our approval. Second, we should have a legal review of CF's intended process and ensure there are no specific concerns to be addressed. We don't expect there will be, but it's an appropriate due diligence step. And I would recommend that we direct Kevin Hawley to make the introductions between our council and CF and allow CF to present the upcoming steps for that review. Number three, there are three what I call baseline surveys to be undertaken, using standardized questions to assess our current situation. These surveys are not targeted at defining the candidate profile, but rather an as-is view of the district. Separate surveys would be done for faculty and staff on one side, students on the other. We're thinking middle school and above students would be included in that survey. And a third tool, not technically a survey that you may be thinking of, but it's a tool called Net Promoter Score. And anybody who's been heavily involved in the digital space is pretty familiar with NPSs. It's essentially a rating, and it's targeted at as broad a population of the community as we can achieve, and we try to make that one happen. It's a simple one question to the community, and would you recommend Loveland City Schools to friends or family? And the response is based on a widely used 10-point scale and a little bit of math that drives the scoring metric that comes out of this. It's a really useful tool, especially one that we could baseline today and update periodically as we go forward, giving us a little bit of a temperature of community perception. For all of these, pre-notification to the targeted groups is needed for these various surveys. And again, I'd recommend that we leave the mechanism to do so in Brad's hands, maybe with an assist from me if we're all comfortable on that. Trying to find the ways to reach into various community pockets to get this done on as broad-based as possible. We'd have to find some ways, maybe some new ways, maybe even including some limited advertising to elicit community feedback, and maybe this can start to make headway and on our much needed community email list that could have many purposes down the road. Next, number four, we need to develop what CF calls aspirational or aspirations statements, which will help guide the development of the eventual candidate profile. Doing this would be facilitated by CF in a board meeting and should take about an hour. I would recommend that we schedule this for our March 16th meeting. And that would make these statements available to be shared with the CAG, the Community Advisory Group, to assist them in their process. Fifth, 5 separate focus groups would be formed around faculty, staff, students, parents, and the community. So those 5 groups. They would be comprised of 6 to 10 people each, and ideally conducted, the focus group sessions would be conducted ideally in person by CF. And subsequent to the group sessions, the thought exchange technology, which CF talked about fairly extensively in their presentation to us several weeks ago, would be used to host online discussions with the full community that those same 5 groups represented. So in other words, we would have a focus group of parents, for example, and follow that up with a thought exchange process for all parents, in part fueled by the topics that were raised during the focus group. And this would be a very valuable mechanism to broaden the reach of the feedback that would ultimately be coming to us and assisting us in the rest of the process. One last time, I think I would recommend that we ask Brad to take the lead in identifying the participants of the focus groups, but do it in collaboration with CF. So all of this leads to enough information to help us determine the ideal candidate profile. CF would summarize for us all of this information, as well as the CAG's, the Community Advisory Group's input. We expect that discussion will require maybe as much as a couple of hours. And I would recommend, because of the amount of time that that would take, that we set a special meeting to do this, hopefully around the last week of March. And following this meeting, this special meeting, if you will, CF would take the lead in candidate identification, and the next phase of the process starts up. That involves, during the April and May timeframe, developing, vetting, and reviewing candidates, leading up to final decisions, presumably in the late May timeframe. So I've shared a lot there. Let me see if Bob or Bob has anything to add, and then I'll turn to the board and ask for your input. Hopefully concurrence, but discussion as needed. And Brad and Kevin, please feel free to weigh in as well as soon as the board gets going. But first of all, Bob or Bob?
I think you did a great summary, Kevin. We're here as a resource for other particular questions the board has. So, but no, I think this is a wonderful summary.
And we just look forward to working with you. Fantastic school district, lots of interest already, even without advertising. And we think that it'll be a great experience for community engagement in particular.
Thanks, guys. How about the board first? Feedback on the outlined process, the staffing strategies, putting Brad in the hot seat on much of it, most of it, all of it, et cetera. It'd be really helpful if everybody talks up and lets us know where your heads are at.
Can go first and say that it looks like a very complete picture of what's happening. I have a sort of a particular, I mean, I'm fine with giving all that work to Brad, but also I have a particular timeline kind of question. So I think I'll save that till we hear if other board members have comments about the general process, thoughts of additional ideas of people to add. But I do have a particular timeline question that I'll ask once we get through some of that.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Kathy. Can I just go around the table and Michelle, you're unmuted. Can I ask you where you're at?
A lot of this sounds really good. I'm just concerned that it might take longer than what we really have. That's my only concern.
Yeah, let me throw that to Bob or Bob. You've done this before. Tell us how to think about that.
So you obviously have to worry about getting the names of the people in a pretty quick order, but the rest of it moves very, very quickly. This will not be the shortest time frame that we work with. So we know we can deliver on a whole series of things in pretty quick order. By the way, the process actually kind of has dual work. You can start cultivating candidates earlier than the ideal candidates. You get people that have shown interest just on the surface. We ultimately you'll make the decisions based on what you actually are looking for. But no, it's a reasonable timeline.
I think it builds excitement in the community when they have this kind of involvement, and it takes time, but these steps go pretty quickly as you see the whole timeline. But they do, it kind of just builds momentum as it moves through the process. And we do have a lot of people express interest along the way. So it's not that the recruitment is only a couple of weeks, it really is already started. But we want the recruitment to fit with the ideal candidate for Loveland. And that's why all this research has to be done and all this input we need, and we're looking forward to it.
If you guys don't mind, can I, just the way my screen is set up, Eileen, can I ask you next for your thoughts?
I think it sounds like a great plan. I just want to make sure that we are able to tap into all of the different pockets within our community. And I think, Brad, do you feel confident at this point that you've met with a wide variety of groups, and groups are pretty fairly represented in who you've met with? And I guess I just want to make sure there's a step where we can identify if there are any deficiencies there, if we're missing anybody, and how can we tap into them?
Brad, would you like to respond to that? You're muted.
I'm comfortable. First of all, I want to compliment you again, Mr. Doherty, on the process. And I think Bob will back me up on this, that I've been on the other side of searches that weren't nearly this thorough, which is probably why you gentlemen decided to start your business, right? So it's exciting to me to see that you have a complete process in place. I feel very confident in being able to get a great representation of the community. I think I already have. In fact, I've started jotting names down. But I think I have a good handle on individuals that would be well suited for this already. And as I look at my upcoming meetings over the next couple of weeks, I think they'll fill in the blanks where there are blanks. Obviously, I'll consult with our consultants and gather their wisdom, and we'll get a plan in place. And I'll have a good list for you here in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Brad. Eric, sorry you're last on my list here, but I'm just going in sequence across the screen. So would you share your thoughts as well with us?
Being last is perfect because it lets me say ditto. But all kidding aside, you know how much work you've done in this. I completely trust the pathway that you've laid out. I think that we all agree that one of the things that we want is to set up our next superintendent for the most success possible. And I think that this pathway that we've chosen is the best way to do that.
Thanks, Eric. Let's see here. Brad, is there anything else you want to add? And then I'll ask Kevin for his thoughts.
I don't think so at this point, unless you have particular questions for me. I think I have, again, I'll say I have my marching orders, and I'm excited to take them on and ready to go.
All right, perfect. And then Kevin, Let me ask you if you want to share any thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I'm happy to support it any way possible. I don't necessarily intend to sound like if there's a common theme, but I just want to say thanks for all the work that you've done. It's a lot of work. It's very thorough. I think for me, this is maybe just on a personal level. I'm just really fascinated on how things are built, like watching a house being built or just seeing the process. And so I think the confidence in seeing the Bob's faces, if you don't mind if I call you the Bobs, and seeing your guys' faces that you can get this done and accomplished, I think I'm more fascinated just to watch it happen. But yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting process. So any way that I can support, and the Bobs and I can talk offline about just how to get them in touch with legal and making sure that everything's up and up.
Just reinforcement again. This is as much for the community as it is for us. But by law, this is one of the things that we do, and from a practical perspective, it's one of the most impactful decisions that we ever get to make. So the effort that we'll all be putting into this is warranted. So, and with that, let me circle back to Kathy. You'd had the question or the issue about timeline, and maybe you had some other thoughts you wanted to share as well.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that I'm understanding what's going to be done by when. Because if I back up from your sort of end point, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but if we were to propose a special meeting at the end of March, that would be to receive and discuss some of this feedback?
It would, yeah.
Go ahead, Bob.
It is, you will be receiving, we can provide you with constant feedback as we go through as board members. So that'll help speed up the process, but we need a board meeting for you to actually to create the ideal candidate profile. What we do is we take all the data and we summarize it for you, package it in a very detailed kind of layout for you. It gives you everything in a very easy place to figure out what you want to do with it. You ultimately have to decide what the ideal candidate is. But yes, that meeting typically takes an hour to 2 hours. The reason for the special board meeting is we don't want to delay into April on that, because that document is what drives all of our analysis on all the candidates through the first part of April, so that we can have them ready for you to review and eventually interview in May.
Okay, so my question backing up is, the community advisory group, we asked for input on that, and that was coming from Brad by the March 16th meeting.
That's right.
Would some of the other work be done before that? Some of some of the, because I just wasn't understanding how we could get everything, you could get everything to get to us if it's happening March 16th.
No,
we have a meeting a week later or so. I wasn't clear on how all that was going to happen.
Yeah, we can give you a complete layout. No, tomorrow morning, Brad will get a phone call, and one of the first things we'll do is get the surveys out the door so they have time to process. We'll get the focus groups done. All of these things can be happening concurrently. The CAG and the board are the recipients of lots of information that comes from these events. You're not actually involved in those activities, nor will staff need to be. The only requirement we have is obviously we need somebody to help us direct us to who to involve from the community and from the school.
Okay, thanks. That helps my timeline question. I was just feeling like everything was going to be done in sort of 7 days. And while I know the world was created in that.
We do not have that kind of power. So.
It might be helpful for everybody. I know the board knows this, but the community should know that our last meeting was February 16th. Of the following morning, we were on the phone with CF talking through the contract, various issues, et cetera. And they were quite willing to, at their risk, hit the ground running and start doing preliminary work on all of this. They took the chance that the contract could, be voted down tonight for some reason. And that gave them a head start, gives us a head start on it. So they've been doing work for 2 weeks already. So Kathy, anything else? I don't know if I cut you.
We enjoy the work. We're excited about it. We'll meet the timeline. We hope to have that you select a superintendent by the end of the school year, and that would really be exciting.
So any other questions or comments from anyone here? If not, I think I can make the assumption that you agree with the recommendations here. If not, please speak up. And if you do, we should move to setting the special meeting date for the end of March. Or Kathy, if you have another way to do that, I'm wide open.
How about if we go ahead and vote on the resolution that's on the table? And then you give us, after we do that, you give us a parameters of when you think a date, and we'll look at calendars. That'll take us a few minutes, I think. But if everybody pulls out their calendars, but we'll go ahead and first vote on the resolution, if that's all right.
Fine by me.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments, then I would ask, I'm not seeing anything, I'd ask Mr. Hawley for a vote on that.
Dr. Switchnow?
You're muted.
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Motion carried. Now we can get to the hard work of picking a meeting date. That's usually a very difficult thing to do.
So I know the CF team, we're thinking the last week of March. That would be the week of the 22nd.
If you could, we'd be looking for ideally on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday.
So that would be 24, 25, 26.
Does that work, Bob? I
Yes.
apologize for not double checking.
No, that's good.
So what I can tell you is that unfortunately, I can't make any of those evenings work, but if it's just a conversation of the board, you could just vote in a treasurer pro temp. Just depends on what what kind of assistance you're looking for with that conversation.
Okay, I've got a little feedback on that, but I think that Mr. Hawley said he can't do Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, I can't make that week work.
Yeah, but we can appoint a treasurer pro tem to hold the meeting. Unfortunately, really the only night that works for me is the Wednesday, the 24th. What about other board members?
Hello. I'm on call that week, so I'm on the bubble, but I should be fine.
Michelle and Eileen?
Is this going to be in person or virtual?
We could do it virtual, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll get to experience the thought exchange process right out of the gate.
So you did say it would be virtual?
Can be,
You
yes.
can have it live or virtual.
Okay.
Okay, so we're
Then I
looking at
could
Wednesday, the
possibly do Thursday, but
Yeah. Well, let me ask the question. Michelle, can you make the 24th? Eileen, can you make the 24th? If you can, I can, and that's that.
The 25th would be better for me.
Kevin, did you hear Eric say the 25th would be better for him?
I did.
I'm actually traveling on the 25th, but if it can be virtual, then I can join virtually.
And I can do the 24th. I can do the 24th.
All right,
Either
Michelle
of them work since it's
Eileen,
going to be virtual.
kind of 24th, 25th, does it work for both of you?
25th is better for me.
Whoa, 25th.
And Eileen?
Yeah, I can do either one. It will just be from the sidelines of a soccer field.
All right, so Kathy, I think you're in the uncomfortable position here if you can make the 25th work.
I'll just have to drive really fast.
Is there a time of day that maybe makes it better?
Pardon?
Is there a time of the day that maybe makes it better?
You just need to give me enough time to get to Philadelphia and get my cheesesteak, and then I will join the meeting, so. Well,
I know a rail
depending on what
car
time the meeting is, will
cheesesteak place.
determine my departure time, so. Yeah, I can do the 25th. We just need to, I won't probably be able to do it at 5 o'clock, but
Later is better?
yes, but I don't want to put it too late because if we're going to spend an hour or two talking, I don't want to. So, you know, if we could do it like no earlier than 6:30.
Does 6:30 work for everybody? I have 1, 2, 3. Michelle, 6:30 work?
I will do my best.
Okay.
Is that too early? 6:30 on the 25th?
No, I have the little one that night, so it gets late.
Oh,
And she has, yeah.
Okay,
So-
apologize for how difficult this is. I do understand. If we can make 25th at 6:30 work, it's not perfect, but we get us all together then. And I do think there's something about all of us being a part of this that's critical.
Absolutely. Yes.
It is.
Yeah, it's a must.
All right, Kathy, do we have Kevin establish it as a planned meeting then?
Kevin, do we need a resolution to call a special meeting for that night?
No, not necessarily, no. I mean, I
He
can
says
just,
we don't necessarily need a resolution. We'll need to follow all the notification procedures, but we will ask Kevin to get it set up. And then we would need to, when we started the meeting, elect a treasurer pro tem to get the meeting started. Would we be asking, we didn't ask, we asking Mr. Nevin to join that meeting with us or just the board?
I'm assuming that Brad would be with us.
Brad's more than welcome. Anybody's welcome. The only interaction will be with the 5 board members.
Okay.
I would extend the invitation to Brad and look forward to
That's good.
any comments he might have during the process. And I see nodding heads
Yeah, okay.
as well, so.
And I'm sorry, did we agree that this was going to be virtual on that night?
Yes.
Okay.
It can be either, but I think virtual is, well, it's going to be a definite virtual for Kathy. It might have to be for Eric if I understand his situation properly. So it's going to be
Okay.
virtual.
All right, thanks.
I
All
also
right.
think it probably makes it a little bit easier for the staff if we do it virtually rather than saying some of us will come here and set up here in a building. I think if some of us are going to be virtual, it's probably easier if we're all virtual as far as setting up for the meeting.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Again, I know it's sometimes challenging with stuff like this, but it's super important. And I think in the rearview mirror someday, we'll be grateful that we made it work. So again, thank you. And I guess back to you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks again, Kevin, for all this work, and thanks to Mr. Farrell and Mr. Summers. I think we're going to need to get them T-shirts made that say, he's the other Bob or something like that. I don't know how that will work, but I'm Bob and fingers going like this or something.
Okay, so Bob and Bob,
again-
just for your information, we're gonna, I think, be moving to executive session at this point, and you don't need to hang around.
All right.
Thanks again,
Thanks,
folks. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Yes.
gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you all for all your work.
Thank you. Bye.
And Kevin is correct, unless there's anything else that the board needs to mention at this point. Our next item would be to enter into executive session to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee or official. There is no board action planned for after executive session. But of course, we will come back to this live Zoom webinar to officially close the meeting, but we will be leaving this meeting and going into a separate executive session meeting. Included in executive session, should it be voted on, would be Mr. Nevin and Mr. Ogden and Mr. Hawley. Is that who we need, or do we need anyone else in the executive session? Okay, I think it would be those three gentlemen plus the board members.
Kathy, I don't know that I
So at this
sent,
time, it would be appropriate for a motion to enter into executive session to consider the employment and compensation of a public employee or official.
So moved.
Dr. Swetchnow moved, Mrs. Washburn seconded. It's actually not a debatable, so Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
and Dr. Swetchnow.
Yes.
Motion carried. I have us going into executive session at 8:24. And is it correct we leave this meeting? Yes.
See you all in executive session.
Okay, and are we going over to the other?
Eric is still in this meeting. Yes, Eric's still in the meeting. And Brad as well.
Kevin, I think they walk too slow.
Without going into any detail right now, I hope I was speaking for you with that last comment.
Yes.
Enough said then. Here we go. And it looks like we're online.
Is it raining?
It's
Or
not
is it
letting
just a
me back
fan?
into the computer.
Kathy, do you want to come and sit next to me? Look, we can be on the same screen. Look, come here. Come, you can sit next to me. We can be together.
Yeah, looks like we're online here, folks.
Kevin's still muted.
We're broadcasting already.
That's not what I did the first time. Okay.
Well, that's because you.
You can click, oh, for the meeting, it should be on the.
Kathy, it looks like we're broadcasting already.
I really want to talk to you about your work sometime.
Sounds good. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I had major ear problems as a kid. And I was a band director and found out that I was like 60% deaf in my one ear. They were so poorly treated.
Yeah.
But I had one of the bones replaced in my ear, which was just really cool to me.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's pretty impressive surgery, especially when it works. It's really cool.
Well, that was back in.
All right. Do we have everybody back in the meeting? Looks like we do.
Yep.
And we are live.
Okay. Everybody's back in the meeting. You should note that we will not have executive session. Sorry. I have to talk. I can't be muted.
It's my fault.
Executive session at 10 p.m. As noted, there is no other business to come before the board, so it's appropriate for a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And I'm not sure if I'm going to accept Eileen's second or not. She's having way too much fun, but I'll say that Mrs. Washburn seconded. Mr. Holly, can we vote on adjourning the meeting?
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchner,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes. Motion carried. The meeting is adjourned at 10:02.
Good night, all.
Thank you all.
Be sure to tune in next time.